All right. Since this is our first episode, I guess it would be good to just introduce ourselves, talk about what exactly we want to do with this podcast. My name's Arjun. I'm one of your co-hosts. I am a student in my fourth year at the University of Toronto, studying physics and cognitive science. And throughout my studies, I've noticed that there are a lot of issues, contemporary issues, with traditional roots that have become problems to our society. And together with Spencer, I'd like to create a space where we can rationally reflect and discuss some of these issues and topics with a perspective that is tailored more toward people our age in their early 20s to mid 20s.
Yeah, my name's Spencer. I'm a fourth year student as well. I'm over in Philadelphia at Thomas Jefferson. I study medicine at an undergrad level, psychology, and I do quite a bit of research as well. Um, the whole thing about this that I'm really kind of interested and excited about is communicating um, societal issues as they sometimes arise, or kind of not standing off to the side and trying to influence them, but standing off and trying to poke at them and discern their nature and what the implication is. And the primary audience is obviously intended as people in their 20s, but it's catered towards anybody. Obviously, folks that are English speakers and you know they'll get more out of this. But it's for any generation that wants to listen. I have some ideas, not all of them are good. You know,
Yeah, I think you guys should keep in mind that we aren't exactly experts on any of these topics. We're still very much in our early careers as academics. So take everything we say with a grain of salt. But our purpose here is really to provoke thoughts and ideas and create a space where we can explore these topics without really clamping down on any one opinion.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. Is a lot of modern discourse has become sound bites, and the goal of these is to be about 30, 40 minutes or so, so enough where you don't get bored. But the whole point is to take a rational perspective, kind of center of the line, and we're not going to be talking about every issue because sometimes they can be a bit, too divisive to talk about, but we're going to talk about issues at large that we think everyone will get something out of.
So, and with that said, I guess we should jump into the topic for our first episode. Spencer, what are we going to be talking about today?
So culture on the whole, we've seen a huge shift in the last 5 years, let alone year. Um, Talking about the nature of capitalism, the death of third spaces, the death of creativity to a large extent, social media. But I wanted to open with this more classic bit of philosophy known as Don Juanism. So just a bit of a background for you. Don Juan, um, it's based on sexual conquest and someone who's transient, exploitive, and a hypersexual narcissistic personality. Don Juan did exist. He was a Spanish libertine, and he'd go from one to the other without emotional attachments. Right? Um, Albert Camus wrote on him in The Myth of Sisyphus, a great book I'd recommend you read. But Carl Jung also spent some time on him talking about the mother complex, which we can derive from Freud. Um, I wanted to compare Don Juanism to Tinder. And I'm interested to hear what Arjun has to think about this, but the same principles that they spent all this time critiquing of, no commitments, issues with one's mother, hypersexuality, and the exploitive nature of sexual conquest from this lens and looking at modern day dating. Um, I wanted to kind of toss around with that backdrop. So,
I think it's an interesting topic to talk about, especially in this kind of social landscape where people are becoming more and more isolated, right? We've heard about the male loneliness epidemic, and I think it's not just restricted to males, but it seems to be at least focused largely on males, maybe incorrectly. But putting that aside, I think that Don Juanism is indicative of a larger problem in society, one that commodifies relationships and romantic interests rather than celebrates it as something more than just something to have. There's a philosopher, I think his name is Eric Fromm, who discussed a topic, a
Mm.
distinction that I think will keep coming up and over again as we continue this podcast. He talked about the two modes of existence, human existence, the having mode and the being mode. Now, the having mode is satisfied by having things, goods or services, having sex, having a home, food, water, things like that. Uh, Now, these things are necessary, but you can also satisfy the having mode through other more superfluous objects, like, I don't know, having a video game system or having a really nice pair of jeans, right? The being mode is something different. The being mode is something that is satisfied by becoming someone. And often you become someone through the influences of other people. So the being mode is satisfied, for example, by courage, by ambition, by wisdom, and by love. I think that there's a serious modal confusion going on in society right now where people are mistaking the things that satisfy the being mode for things that satisfy the having mode and vice versa. So this kind of commodification of relationships that we see in places like Tinder and in the dating marketplace as a whole demonstrate to me that people are trying to satisfy the being mode, love, by kind of having these on and off relationships, which doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. I want to throw some data at you because it's interesting. Um, Talking about Generation Z, and I'll say millennials as well, people in their 20s to 40s, um, men and women are showing similar statistics in Japan, right? We've got 42% of men and 44% of women were virgins in that age range in Japan, 18 to 34. And this is coming out of the Washington Post, by the way. And 18 to 34, 35% of women and 40% of men had zero dating experience. Those are very similar numbers, right? Um, a little less than half. And you look at that and you're like, that doesn't make any sense, right? The article just came out, and I forget the newspaper. Um, I'll find it eventually. But they said in terms of happiness scales too, right? The youth used to be the most happy, and that's no longer the case. The youth are actually the most miserable um, out of any generation, Gen Z at least. And it's just interesting. I don't know. And the being and having are very different things because if you look at the exploitive nature of relationships per se in Japan between, I don't know, the workplace and the employee, right? Or the 996 culture you see in China, right? This has led to proliferation, at least in Japan, of red light districts, maid cafes, and, internet smut that I care not to comment on. Um, you know, and I don't think that's healthy
I agree.
because it's eating your cake without having it too.
Yeah. How much of this do you think is promoted and encouraged by the economic system in which we live?
Well, I don't know. It depends on the country, right? If you're talking about the US of A, we're a lot more capitalist than we are socialist, at least at surface value. Over in Canada, you guys are a bit more socialist than we are, but you know, if you're rich, you're socialist, and if you're poor, you're capitalist. Government bailouts for everybody. Yay. Uh, you know, I would say that it definitely benefits the workplace if a mother doesn't have kids because she'll work harder. Dual income household, no kids, great, more productive hours for the company. So it benefits the stock market if people don't have kids, at least in the short term. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I do think that apps like Tinder and the dating marketplace as a whole does seem to run on the profit motive more than it does on bringing people together. That might contribute to this situation in which we found ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't. I'm gonna verify it real quick, but I'm pretty sure the people who own Hinge are the same ones that own Tinder. Um, I want to make sure I say that the right way. Yeah, yeah, Match Group. They own Tinder, OkCupid, Hinge, Plenty of Fish, Match.com, and a few other bits. Um, and so it's all the same parent company, right? And they're all trying to extract value. But in the same commodification of the dating scene, is the same commodification you see of the worker. I was at some presentation yesterday, and they're like, the dream of staying with a company for 40 years has long been dead, shot. It's left in the yard. You're at
Hmm.
four, five, six companies, gig workers, right? Same
Yeah.
thing with dating. The dream of, oh yeah, wife and two kids, or husband and two kids, or what have you. That's also gone. One income households,
Yeah.
for
I
the
know what
most
you
part.
mean. Uh, though I have met some people who have found extreme success through dating apps. Two of my friends, for example, this past summer decided to get on dating apps together, and they went on a lot of dates, to be sure. A lot of them didn't turn out so great. But now both of them have found someone that they met through these dating apps, and they seem to be in happy relationships.
Yeah, I would say you look at the mean and you look at the exemptions. And I can't speak. My experience of dating apps wasn't amazing. Went on plenty of dates, but none of them really stuck. That doesn't necessarily mean that dating apps are bad. They do fulfill their purpose. They're very good at that, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but are we? I believe the purpose is misguided.
Yeah, yeah. I think we should try to. I've always wondered how to approach love and relationships. I think that love should be seen as something that built on top of a pre-existing friendship of sorts. And you should already have a good rapport with someone in order to truly love them. So I think dating is meant to be that kind of period in which you build rapport with someone, while love
Hmm.
is when you really embrace who they are and
Yeah,
you kind of join together in this extended cognitive state with them.
it's a very. It's a good way to put it. More heightened than I would have. I wanted to kind of pivot because on the sort of dating apps fill this void that was never meant to be there to begin with because you have what's called a third space. And I'm sure everyone knows most of the definitions for it, but a third space is, well, you've got home, that's your first space, your work is your second space, but where do you go when you're not home or work? Some people that might have been churches, public venues, public places that you'd gather, bars, taverns, whatever. But we've seen that decline since COVID. Um, I mean, at least here in Philadelphia. I don't know about for you in Canada.
Canada is, some people might get mad at me for this. In many ways, it's similar to the US, culture-wise, that
Yeah,
is, in many ways. But obviously, their government is a little bit different,
yeah.
as you mentioned before.
Well, you guys are nicer, you know. Uh, But no, we've seen a real decline in third spaces. And I mean, there's a resurgence post-COVID, right? But it's not what it was. You know, it's not what we grew up with. That's for sure. Um, and I think that the loss and the death of these third spaces is what's leading to this kind of exodus to dating apps. Because it's like, well, if I can't meet somebody, you know, organically, I still want to meet them. So you're forced into, I'll say, a funnel, inorganically or not at all. There are people that do it organically still. I shouldn't say everybody, but I'd say the majority.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that third spaces have been really hard to find. Luckily, I live in a city, as do you, so it's not that difficult to find them. They're more common in cities, especially among people our age. For example, I've recently started attending a philosophy cafe ho hosted by, I think, the Being and Becoming group that's run by a bunch of philosophy PhDs uh,
Mm.
in the Toronto area. And it's been a great place to meet other people who are interested in philosophy. It's been a great place to hear other people's opinions on philosophical positions that I'm interested in, like nihilism and things like that. And it establishes a community of people who are willing to come together and discuss really profound ideas. That is a prime example, in my opinion, of a third space. And we need more places like that, especially across North America.
Yeah. Well, I do something similar in Philly for Stoics, and uh, it's. I will say I pulled up some data for you. 40% of heterosexual, I'm saying heterosexual relationships, and a significant, as it quotes, percentage of partnered adults met online, but that's still the minority. And I've seen a shift in the last year of people trying to eschew dating apps, saying we hate them, right? And that this group of people in our generation, a lot of people are going to church, which didn't expect that. A lot of people are trying to find these third spaces or having online communities that meet in person, like just meetups. Um, so I think there's a concerted effort for folks our age of like, hey, this isn't the way it should be, which it's great to see.
Yeah, there is that kind of disconnect with people our age who I think inherited the promise of a future in which their standard of living would be higher and there would be more people and life would be better, who are now coming to terms with the realization that maybe that kind of progressive, incremental future doesn't really exist for them, or that they need to try much harder to find
Mm.
it. They need to carve a path for themselves there. I think the loneliness epidemic has made people realize that connecting with people isn't probably as easy as it was beforehand. And we may talk about how social media plays a role in that as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so the last comment on the standard of living thing. Do you know why Trader Joe's got so popular? One of the reasons.
I'm not sure.
There's about 500 of them now, but one of the executives at some point described that Trader Joe's was built for this tidal wave of college graduates that had good taste, but not enough money to buy from these like incredibly expensive stores. So it's this economic thing of everyone's got good taste, but do you have the money necessarily? And social media is a killer. It really is. I mean, beyond the money aspect, that they're making money off you by using it, but it's really a killer for time and creativity.
No. Yeah, I think social media has profoundly shifted the way we view ourselves in the world and how we view a relationship with other people. Now it's all about trying to appear as someone maybe you're not, or trying to live up to expectations that you gain from seeing people on social media, or maybe it's about getting likes, like cloud chasing, things like that. It seems that, like, drawing back to what I mentioned before, social media is all about satisfying the having mode. It is not predicated on the idea of satisfying the being mode at all.
No, and it's not a tangible thing, right? Like doom scrolling, that's a huge thing. I mean, I'm listen, I'm guilty, right? Guilty as charged. I'll do it from time to
Mhm.
time. I think we all do, but I'll sit there for a half hour and it's like I've been awoken from like a Benadryl induced nap of like I'm groggy. I'm like, what happened? Like where'd my half hour go? Where'd my hour go? You have nothing to show for it. Um, which I think again feeds into what I mentioned before with third spaces. Would you rather rot on your phone or go outside? The people that do go outside, it's like, well, where is everybody? Well, a good percentage of them are rotting on their phones or Netflix, Hulu, Tubi, whatever. Pick your streaming service of choice.
Yeah, it's incredibly sad to me that the movies have started to die out because of these streaming services. This is just one example. The movies, I think, are a great place to come together as an audience and
Mm.
see things you normally wouldn't, in a way that you normally wouldn't be able to see. In Toronto, film was still pretty popular, but back when I was living in New Jersey, man, the theaters were not that popular. Maybe because they commuted to theaters was pretty bad, but that's another story. I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, social media is kind of designed to intelligently separate you from other people while making you feel like you're connected when you're really not.
Yeah. I mean, it's another episode or another time to talk about social media and the rise in extremism. That's a whole tough bolus to chew on. But social media it wants one thing out of you, and that's your time.
Yeah, that's what it was. Unfortunately, it's really easy to get sucked in, like you said. How do you think we can prevent ourselves from getting sucked into social media? And what are other ways of satisfying the kind of urge you think that are more productive?
Well, social media has remained quite popular because of the appearances, as you said, but also because the biochemistry of it. If you see videos that make you sad, angry, happy, excited, That's dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine dumps, just boom, 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 boom. Um, and that's a lot of stimulation. And our simian brains just love that sort of thing. Um, I'm as guilty as the next. So getting away from that's difficult. So I use this app called, well, I'm not promoting them intentionally, but Opal. It'll lock my Instagram or whatever other social media, and I have to wait like 20 seconds to open it. And it's quite wonderful, really, because I realize how stupid I am waiting in line for my coffee in the morning, and I'm like, why am I opening Instagram? I'm just waiting in line. But it's the biggest thing I want to highlight is being bored is okay. Being bored is should be encouraged because that's what leads to creativity, you know?
How do you think being bored leads to creativity?
Well, you know the term shower thought, yeah?
Yeah,
Can you scroll on your phone when you're in the shower?
I'm sure some people have tried, but probably not.
Right, exactly. So being in the shower is some rote thing. You do it all the time, but it's meditative. Your mind's blank, and that gives you the space to have an idea. Same thing with, I don't know, sitting on the toilet or sitting on the subway. We don't have your phone out or something or the other, and that space to reflect. Mozart was famed to go on these long walks thinking about music because he'd have his like aha eureka, about his next sonata, just in that boredom. And I don't encourage people to go sit and watch paint dry, and God no. But being creative is the one thing that separates us from the rest of the world in terms of how am I better than a fire ant? Well, I can think and dream and love. Anything and everything does consume mindlessly.
hmm There, this is actually something that I've learned about in my studies in cognitive science. It's called incubation. It's the process by which we obtain insights after some period of time. From what I've found and what I've heard in my studies, incubation occurs best when you're able to step away from a problem and allow the pre-existing frame, the pre-existing idea of the problem that you've built to dissipate, right? Our memory isn't, it's not accurate to reality. It's more kind of a reconstructive idea of the relevant aspects of the environment and the problem that we found. So by stepping away from a problem, you're able to allow your brain to kind of lose some of the scaffolding of that frame that it built. And when you come back to the problem, you're able to see it in a new light and able to find different parts of it to be relevant and rebuild that frame in a way that may enable you to solve the problem again.
Well, I'll be a thorn in your side. Why should I care about being creative?
If I'm being philosophical, I would argue that being creative is a deeply human endeavor. As self-referential, self-aware beings that seek to continue our existence in the world, being creative is a form of expression onto the world that is deeply unique to ourselves and our ideas and our worldviews. But I mean, from a more casual perspective, being creative is just pleasurable. It's meaningful. It's nice to have. Just, I think that being creative is one of the things that makes life more meaningful. It makes your life fuller. It gives it that sense of being, right? Harkening back to that idea again, it satisfies your being mode. It ties you deeply to the world in a way that simply passively accepting information cannot. So it's you taking what the world has given you and actively placing your own stamp on it.
Yeah. See, there's an importance in being a critic as well. Um, Everyone's like, you can't be too much a connoisseur, you can't be too staunchly, and I would argue like some modern art I don't necessarily espouse. Give me my impressionism, right? Uh, me and Renoir are homies, but
hmm
but at some point someone had to be a critic and say, well, I don't think we should be eating all this like mammoth raw. Well, what if we cooked it? It's like, ah, you're being haughty, you're being pretentious. So like, why would you do that? You know, and well, obviously you get more nutrition from cooked meat. And someone could have said, I wish to build my house of stone instead of a mud daub. And it's like, oh, why would you do that? You know, how costly, how pretentious. Uh, there's this importance of pretension, and there always will be. And that comes from creativity of seeing something that isn't there. Um, I think if we lose that, then we lose human progress. Because tradition is good, it keeps us anchored. But if we were all traditional, um, we wouldn't really get anywhere because society needs to advance, and that can be in many ways.
Yeah, creativity is incredibly important to the advancements of society, the advancement of technology, and the advancement of our understanding of ourselves. It's the term pretentious is really sour to me because often it's used as a criticism to shut down something with which people disagree or a piece of media that people don't fully understand. Now, not to say that certain artists and authors don't have a pretentious attitude or a haughty attitude, but I think when we're criticizing a piece of art specifically, a piece of media, we should focus on its own merits and form a more thorough criticism of what it's doing in and of itself, rather than try and ascertain or speculate as to what the artist's or author's intention was.
Yeah. I mean, you can be too pretentious. I should also have that caveat. I you know, have that caveat.
Yeah, there are definitely some people who, like the typical film student stereotype. No, hey, no hate to all my film
No,
students out there. I think film
no
is
hate.
great. Keep doing what you're doing. But the typical film student, quote unquote, has a kind of attitude that is more performative rather than genuine. And I think
Oh, yeah.
that's where pretentiousness kind of comes from.
Yeah. I met some Harvard film student at a conference, and I won't give too many details, but my goodness, um, I heard a poster presentation for like 10 minutes on a Civil War movie, and I'm like, you are pretentious as I can't say those words. Why should I care? And I think to wrap it up, why should you, the listener, care? Why have you listened to me babble for this half hour or whatever it's been? Why do you think we should care, Arjun?
I think, like we said, we're facing a profound crisis of loneliness and a profound crisis of meaning in life. Part of the work I'm doing right now with a professor of mine is precisely centered on this kind of idea that our understanding of meaning in life is deeply flawed. If we want to solve this kind of issue, this loneliness crisis, this separation from other people, and this tension between how people think they should act and how they really want to act, we need to examine kind of how our culture is shaping us, how social media is shaping us, how external factors are shaping who we are. But we should also, and if we're cognizant of that, we can take steps to mitigate it. We can take steps to change our worldview. We become more introspective, more philosophical. And in doing so, we could probably put ourselves on a path that can lead to greater meaning, that can lead to a greater understanding of other people's worldviews. Our knowledge isn't just, how do I put this? It's very difficult to talk about this. If we want to understand the world and understand how we find life to be meaningful, we need to challenge our own worldviews, and we need to think critically about our place in society and in culture. I think that's kind of what we've talked about here, and that's what we want to do. That's what we want to provoke here.
Yeah. I mean, just to add on, when I'm walking about Philly, if I see someone smoking on the train or see someone littering, I'll call them out on it. That's not always the smartest thing to do. I wouldn't encourage it, but call them out. Hey, this is my city too. What are you doing? And the same thing goes for creativity. Hey, this is our world. This is our lives. We are the masters of our own fates. Go out there and be creative. I mean, if the worst thing that happens is if you fail, then you've lost nothing because you've gained nothing. So why wouldn't you go be creative and go try to love somebody, Um, if that's your thing. Uh, but life's too short, life's too short. And Arjun put it much more eloquently than I could have. But I'll leave you with a Turkish proverb I love of coffee should be black as hell, strong as death, and sweet as love. And I think life should be that way too. You know, God gave man the ability to suffer because he wanted them to know how good he could have it. So, take those risks. But, maybe maybe don't be Don Juan, but go out there and have some fun.
No,
Um,
no, precisely. I'm gonna co-opt that proverb. That's a good one.
we'll figure out what we're talking about next time, but I appreciate everybody for listening to my babbling, so thank you.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, for our first episode. And we hope that you had a good time here. We hope that you learned something. We hope that you didn't take our word for gospel because you shouldn't. But we
No,
also hope that we created a couple of moments, period of time, 30 minutes, in which you could rationally reflect on how you see yourself in the world and how you can improve your understanding of your place in the world as well.
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.